and stormy night. The wind howled and the rain thrashed upon the ground and... That's wrong. That's not it at all. Actually, it was a bright, beautiful, sunshiny day.
Oh my.
Oh my, indeed. And it was beautiful. And the sun was shining and gleaming off everything. And it was hitting the morning dew and sparkling. And everything was fresh and yummy.
Daria Welsh is a professional woman storyteller of modern era. She comes from County Dublin and is also a professional photographer, comedian and poet. She writes and tells her own stories and does voluntary storytelling as well, participating in events and festivals in Ireland and America. She released her own CD of storytelling with the title The Wonderful Adventure of Lorcan the Lamb and His Woolly Coat Part 1, Meet Lorcan the Lamb. She is one of the prominent storytellers participating in the World Storytelling Day, which is celebrated worldwide on the spring equinox every year, the exact date being the 20th of March this year.
There are different types of stories to be told. Fairy tales, ghost stories, and other short narratives are often told by both men and women. Great hero stories are traditionally left to men to tell. It is also common for men to travel to hear stories, while women stay at home and tell stories amongst themselves. There is an old proverb that states, "A woman feony or a crowing hen." It was not common to come across a woman who would take on the task of telling the long and complex stories. Peg Sayers, however, did, and she did so quite well. Peg is considered one of the greatest women storytellers of recent times. Robin Flower talked very highly of Peg in his book, The Western Island. He says, "She is one of the finest speakers in the island. She has so clean and finished a style of speech that you can follow all the nicest articulations of the language on her lips without any effort. She is a natural orator with so keen a sense of the turn of phrase and the lifting rhythm appropriate to Irish that her words could be written down as they leave her lips, and they would have the effect of literature with no savor of artificial composition." O'Daly also wrote of Peg's storytelling and what it was like when he had the chance to sit and listen to her amongst the company of her neighbors. He recalled that she took charge of the room and dominated the scene. He says this was the most unusual for the area she comes from because most of the time the women sit next to the men who would be telling the stories. But it was her. She was the one everyone came to listen to. He claims she would illustrate it richly from her repertoire of verses, proverb, and story. When the visitors left each night, Peg would draw the ashes over the bare embers to preserve the fire till morning, reciting her customary prayer. "I preserve the fire as Christ preserves all, Bridget at the two ends of the house, and Mary in the center. The three angels and the three apostles who are highest in the kingdom of grace, guarding this house and the contents until day."
Another contemporary women storyteller from Northern Ireland is Liz Ware. In an interview for Belfast Newsletter, she said she loved reading children adventure books when she was little, and also stories well told in her home. She said her mother was very good at telling stories. This might have provided Liz with some storytelling background. She worked as a librarian and often read stories to children. Later on, she started to memorize the stories she read and began also telling her own stories. Storytelling became her full-time job, and today she travels worldwide, participating in storytelling events and festivals all over the world. She is the first winner of the International Storybridge Award from the International Storytelling Network, USA, and tells her stories to both children and adults, although she admitted she has to adapt the choice of the story to the place she is in. She also trains marketing companies in storytelling, since it was acknowledged as a marketing instrument. She is a writer as well and published 3 children's storybooks, Boom Chicka Boom, When Thou Was Away, and Here, There and Everywhere.
The native people tamed wolves. They tamed them, and over the generation the wolves became dogs. And the dogs were very helpful. The dogs could pull sledges, the dogs could guard the camp, the dogs could hunt for meat. Very useful creatures. But you know, they thought human beings were really stupid. They can't run as fast as us. They can't smell their enemies coming. They can't hear their enemies coming. They can't rip meat just with their teeth. But there were two things that human beings wanted to do, or that human beings could do, and even Liz makes mistakes. There were two things that human beings could do that the dogs wanted to do. And that was to sing and dance. When the people were singing and dancing, the dogs would be watching them all the time. But the human beings would say, remember, we're human, you're only dogs, you can't sing and dance. And the dogs would go, "Rah." But one weekend, all the people went away to a great feast, and the dogs were left on their own. And two dogs put their paws up against each other, start standing on their back legs going, "Arr, arr, arr, arr." The dog said, what are you doing? They said, we're singing, we're dancing. You look stupid, your tails are hanging in the mud. So they just turned around and went and took off their tails, because in those days they could. So all the dogs went, and they made a big pile of tails, and all the dogs stood up and started to dance. Arr, 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 arr. But they weren't paying any attention, and out of the darkness they heard a voice saying, dogs, what are you doing? They went, oh, it's human beings, oh, their tails. And they just grabbed any old tail they could and stuck them on. And when the human beings came, they were lying there looking like this. And the human beings were saying, what were you doing? The dogs were going, oh, nothing. You know how dogs can do that. But ever since then, the dogs were in such a hurry, they put on any old tail they could grab. So you'll notice whenever you see a dog out in the street and it meets another dog, first thing they usually do is go and sniff each other's tail, because they're looking for their own. And if you see a dog lying asleep at night, you'll see its leg going sometimes like this, because it's dreaming of a time when it could sing and when it could dance. That's the story.